Hello, Deepak. Deepak sir.
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you, Santosh, sir. Before I start with my session, I once again request all the participants to please mute your audio and don't annotate in between the slides. We'll have one question answer session, or I can call it as a discussion session at the end of my presentation, so that others will not be disturbed. Otherwise, if you unmute your audio, it will be disturbance to others and to me also. So I thank in advance to everyone for muting your audios. I will start my sessions now. So my session will be on lessons learned from structural failure. So these are my actually the contents. We'll feel first the importance of the today's topic. Then we'll see what kind of structural failures we'll be looking today. And the third one is a very much interesting topic, which one to choose. So I will not disclose anything about that now. So we'll see that that thing later. Now, when we want to feel the importance of this topic, I want to take example of some scientific experiments. Scientists sometimes get a little excited when an experiment doesn't work the way they expect it to. So what they do, it's an opportunity for them to learn something new about the world, and then they can always change the experiment a bit to try again next time, so that the experiment will become successful. So this is regarding the scientific experiments. Now, this is little bit different. Rather, I would say it's totally different in terms of engineering. How it is different in terms of engineering experiments? Let me see. Designers and engineers generally prefer to find out something's wrong before it's built instead of after, right? Before it is built, engineers want to find what is wrong with that structure before it is built, because if it is found out after it is built, so it's a disastrous, because that's what engineering failures are, really disastrous. So but engineering failures have happened. We can't say that none of the engineering structures have never failed at all, but the engineering structures have failure has happened. So but we can call them as they are an opportunity to learn what not to do next time. That's the very simple thing what we can do. And let me take this opportunity in this session, and we'll see some of the failures of the structure, and we'll see what we can learn from those things, and what we should not do next time when we go to design or build such type of structures. Okay, so let's take this opportunity and learn from structural failures and try not to repeat the same mistakes. Rather, I would say somebody has told that every new mistake is an opportunity to learn, but repeating the same mistake, we should term it as a blunder. So everyone has a chance to do new mistake, but the same mistake should not be repeated. That's what we have to keep in mind. Okay. So now when I move to the next slide, so which are all the structural failures we'll be looking today? We'll be looking all these structural failures. The first one will be Hyatt Regency walkway failure, Tacoma narrow bridge failure, Cantho bridge failure, City Cop Tower. It's actually not a failure, but something very important lesson is to be learned from that. And the next one is also the same thing. It didn't fail, but something important thing we can learn from that. That is Millennium Bridge. And the last one is a very funny one, Walkie Talkie Tower. So I have ended my session with that little funny type of failure. So we'll see all those things one by one now. So let's start our journey. The first one, let me take the Hyatt Regency walkway failure. So first, I will give the introduction about the structure, and we'll see what has actually happened there. The Sheraton Kansas City Hotel at Crown Center is almost about 53.62 meter, that is 45-story hotel located in the Crown Center complex in Kansas City. It has almost about 3,900 square meters of function space and almost 1,600 square meters ballroom and a dedicated exhibit hall with almost about 1,400 meters square. It has 733 guest rooms, including 42 suites. So this is the picture what you can see of a Hyatt Regency, which is located in Kansas City. So what exactly happened here? On July 17, 1981, two walkways collapsed without the warning at the Hyatt Regency Hotel, one directly above the other. They crashed onto a tea dance floor being held in the hotel's lobby, killing almost around 114 people and injuring severely almost around 216 people. Approximately 1,600 people gathered in the atrium for a tea dance on the evening of Friday, July 17, 1981. The second level walkway held approximately 40 people, and at approximately 7:05 p.m., with more on the third and an additional of 16 to 20 on the fourth floor walkway. Guests heard popping noises moment before the fourth floor walkway dropped several inches, paused, then fell completely onto the second floor walkway. Then both walkways fell to the lobby floor. So these are some of the photographs showing the collapse of the walkways. You can see here, this is the fourth floor walkway which got collapsed, and you can see the situation of a second floor walkway. So in this picture also, you can see the same thing. And this picture will actually give you the whole idea what happened there. So this is actually the third floor walkway, which nothing happened to this one. So what was actually the cause of the collapse? Instead of being supported by pillars, each walkway was actually suspended from long rods hanging down from the ceiling. So the walkways were so called the skywalks because nothing was supporting beneath that. So they were totally hanging from the ceiling. So that's why they were called as skywalks. The second floor skywalk hung below the fourth floor skywalk, with the third floor skywalk off to the side on the separate supports. I'll show you the diagrams. Yeah. So this is the second floor walkway, which was supported below the fourth floor walkway. And why they actually collapsed? Investigators discovered a change to the original design of the walkways that was actually proposed by the fabricator and mistakenly approved by the structural engineer. What at the first glance seemed to be a subtle adjustment to the design turned out to be root cause of the failure. Yeah, here you can see this was the box girder which were actually supporting the walkway, and these were the hanging rods which were supporting the box girders. Yeah, now this was actually the proposed original design, and you can see here this was the second floor walkway. This is, I'm showing the cross section, and this was the fourth floor walkway. These were the anchor rods which were supporting both the walkways. This was actually the original design, but this was not adopted at that point of time. Why? Now the fabricator responsible for constructing the walkways objected to this plan because it would require screw threads for the entire length of the hanger rods, which could easily damaged during the construction. It was his assumption that if we provide the screw threads for the whole length of the anchor rods, it may easily get damaged during the construction. So it is not, this design is not a feasible one. So he came up with this kind of idea. This was the changed design which was actually adopted. So they proposed to split the hanger rods into two sets. So these hanger rods were supporting the fourth floor walkway, and these hanger rods were actually supporting the second floor walkway. One to connect the fourth floor walkway to the roof, and one to connect the second floor walkway up to the fourth floor girders. Now, if you don't notice the significance of this change, hold on, you're not alone. It was actually approved by the engineer without a detailed review or calculations, which would have revealed its inherent flaw, but it was unnoticed. So what was actually the mistake here? What was the mistake in the proposed design? So let me come back to the original design. In this setup, which represents the original design, the load of the two walkways is independently transferred to the hanger rods, right? So now when I come to the changed design, you can see here at the design change in this configuration, notice that the entire weight of the second floor walkway is being borne not directly by the hanger rod, but instead by the girder above. So the total load of the second floor walkway is now borne by this fourth floor walkway girder and not directly by this anchor rod. Still the anchor rods are carrying the same weight, But in this case, the load of the second floor walkway was actually totally borne by the fourth floor walkway. Now, this picture will actually tell you the thing. This is the original design where you can see this was the fourth floor girder which was carrying 2L load, and this was the load from the second floor walkway. Now in the changed design, you can see this nut now is actually not taking only L, instead it is actually taking 2L, means the 2 times that of the load, which was actually unnoticed. In simple words, if you are unable to understand the things, in simple words, imagine that you and your friend are both hanging on a rope. The original design is the equivalent of you both holding on the rope independently, whereas the design change is equivalent of your friend hanging onto your ankles. Instead of hanging onto the rope, he is hanging onto your ankles. The total weight supported by the rope is still the same in both the cases, but your likelihood of maintaining the grip with your friend's ankle is not. Hence, you are on a high probability that you may slip from the ankles of your friend and you may fall down. So the same thing happened in this case also. So this subtle change was identified by the investigators after the collapse. With so many people on the walkway that evening, the load on the connection was too great. You can see here, this was the anchor rod and these were the anchor rods. So this was the connection which actually failed on that day. Hence, actually the box girder split open, slipping past the washers and nuts, leading to the collapse of both the walkways. You can see here in this diagram, you can easily see the box girder has totally split open and both the walkways got collapsed. Now this GIF file will actually slightly give you what happened exactly on that day. You can see here, because of that, the box girder is getting split open. So this caused the failure. So what lessons we can learn from this? There is an implicit handshake between the society and its engineers. We hardly have a choice but to trust that the constructed environment that we live in is safe and sound. When an engineer seals a design, he or she takes responsibility for its accuracy and safety to the general public. But the error is human, and that includes engineers, because engineers are also human beings. So we try to develop conventions and processes that can catch and correct from mistakes before they get too far, which actually happened in this case. And that includes studying and learning from the errors made in the past. That's why I chose this topic. The failure of the Hyatt Regency walkways is an important case study taught to nearly every engineer with the goal that such a tragedy will never occur again. So we'll move on to the next type of failure. It is called the Tacoma narrow bridge failure. I think many of you might have learned about this type of failure, which is very much essential for any civil engineer, or I can say a structural engineer. About the structure, in the 1940 Tacoma Narrows Bridge was a suspension bridge in the US state of Washington that spanned the Tacoma Narrows Strait of Puget Sound between. The design type was a suspension bridge. The total length was almost around 1800 meters. The longest span in the bridge was almost around 850 meters, and the clearance below the deck of the bridge was 60 meters. This was a poster which was circulated during the official opening of the Tacoma's narrow bridge. Okay, so what happened here? Even before it opened in 1940, people noticed something strange about the Washington State's Tacoma narrow bridge. It moved. Gentle winds could make the long suspension bridge flex up and down by meters at a time, making it very hard to drive or even walk across the bridge. British designers tried to keep it from bouncing so much by installing shock absorbers, but they weren't effective at all. About 4 months after it opened to the public, one of its cables snapped. From how high the bridge was bouncing, actually a strong wind and other cables started to slide around this, letting the bridge to start twisting back and forth instead of bouncing. So this GIF file will actually tell you how the bouncing effects and twisting effects of the narrow bridge were there. This was happening because of the wind. Eventually, the middle part of the bridge broke off and fell into the water below. Fortunately, there was no any fatality at this time. Actually, what was the cause of the failure? Tacoma Narrows failed because of something called aeroelastic flutter. The first cable snapped. Its side of the bridge fell slightly because it was less supported. Then the other cables on that slide pulled up like stretched out rubber bands, and the bridge started twisting back and forth. Then a wind gave each twist a little boost. So small boost built up over the course of the time and eventually twisted the bridge apart. We structure engineer call it as a resonance, where I can call resonance as a when the natural frequency and the operating frequency, both of them match, the resonance effect comes into picture. And the same thing happened in this Tacoma's narrow bridge also. Understanding what caused the resonance in the bridge, let me explain you with a simple sketch. Rather than the truss through type bridge in which wind can easily flow, this type of shape of the Tacoma narrow bridge was actually adopted, with the large steel plates on either side of the bridge were taken into consideration. Now, what was the mistake in selecting this type of construction? Now, large steel plates on either side created some strange interaction with the wind. Whenever the wind tries to flow across the bridge, it created some strange interaction with the wind. So what were those interactions? Any amount of twist in the bridge created vortices. You can see these are the vortices. Vortices are areas of low pressure in locations that actually amplify the twisting motion. As the bridge returned to its natural state, its momentum twisted it in the other direction, where the wind could catch it and continue twisting. So this type of low pressure area and twisting of the bridge created, and the bridge started twisting back and forth. And that was the main cause of the failure. Now, what are the lessons learned here? One way that a modern bridge avoid flutter is to include a gap in the center of the deck so that the pressure on either side can equalize. Now, the modern day bridges, they are actually providing the gap in the center of the bridge so that there will not be creation of any air vortices and low pressure area. Another option is to make the bridge deck type more aerodynamic to avoid creating vortices that push and pull on the structure. The main lesson learned isn't necessarily that you should make sure to consider aeroelastic effect when you design a suspension bridge, even though you definitely always should. But I think more importantly, it's a reminder of how profoundly capable we are of making mistakes. Unanticipated challenges are cost of innovation, and that's something that we can all keep in mind. We'll move to the next one. This is the next type of collapse, that is called the Cantho Bridge collapse. About the structure, Cantho Bridge is a cable-stayed bridge over the one river, How River, the largest distributary of the Mekong River in the city in the southern Vietnam. The bridge is almost around 2.75 kilometers long. It has 6-lane carriageway measuring 23 meters in width, with 4 lanes for traffic and 2 lanes for bicycles and motorbikes. It has a clearance of almost around 39 meters, which allows large ships to pass underneath it. The bridge was actually inaugurated on April 24, 2010. This is a picture which actually shows you the Cantho Bridge, which is located in Vietnam. So what happened here? A 90-meter approach ramp of the Cantho Bridge collapsed during the construction on the morning of September 26, 2007, falling from about 30 meters in the air. The collapse section was above a small island located on the long side of the bridge. There were almost around 250 engineers and workers working on and under the span at that time. The official death toll was 54, with 80 severely injured people. So these are some of the photographs which actually show the collapse of that 90-meter stretch. You can see here, In this section, you can see the middle portion of the bridge has totally collapsed. So what was the cause of the incident? As per some of the theories goes, investigators reported that officials suggested that the rain might have softened the foundations on which the bridge was standing. Another theory suggested that the early removal of the scaffolding, while the concrete structure had been filled up just for 2 days, may have been the cause of the accident. Another theory says is that the sinking of the scaffolding, which had to bear 6,000 metric ton of concrete structure, might have been the cause of the collapse. Before the collapse, on 12 January, a Japanese construction consultant recommended some specific measures for installing a temporary poles for the scaffolding. Piling testing for their loading must be carried out in accordance with the international standards and codes, which he actually proposed. According to this consultant, the loading capacity of the scaffolding as per the detailed design proposed by the contractor just meets 15% required loading. He remarked that the contractor just multiplied the pile loading ratio by 1.15 instead of 1.25, which was according to the American standard, or 1.35, which was according to the Japanese standard. But he actually multiplied the pile overloading ratio by just 1.15. When calculating wind force also to the temporary piles, the contractor just applied a wind force of 0.5 kilopascal, which was too low. It should have been 2.5 kilopascal as per the local topography goals. He therefore required the contractor to redo their temporary pile and scaffolding detailed engineering design, but it never happened. So that was actually the cause of the failure as per some of the theories. We'll move to the next one. This is a City Corp tower. This is actually not a failure, but very important lesson need to be learned from this kind of failure. This actually could have happened, and it could have totally wiped out one of the New York City skyscraper. I'll tell you about this structure now. It is an office tower in New York City, located at 53rd Street between Lexington and 3rd Avenues in Midtown Manhattan, built in 1977 to house the headquarters of Citibank. It is almost around 280 meters tall and has 59 floors with almost around 1.3 million square feet. It approximates around 120,000 square meters for office space. You can pick it up from the New York City skyline by its 45-degree angle drop. You can see, you can easily distinguish this skyscraper in New York by its very distinctive nature of a 45-degree angle drop. It's the base of the building that really makes the tower so unique. The bottom 9 of its 59 stories are something called stilts. These are actually called the stilts, or also they are called super columns. This thing does not look sturdy, but it has to be sturdy. Otherwise, they would have not built it this way, right? The design originated with the need to accommodate St. Peterson Church, which occupied one of the corner of the building site. This is the church, which was actually originally there before this structure was built. The condition that this church gave to the construction people who were about to construct this one is that new building in the same location, provided that the corner of the lot not to be touched. The company was free to build their skyscraper around the church and in the airspace about. Means this church was actually obstructing one of the corner columns of this structure, and they told that this structure should not be built, and if it is to be built, they should not actually disturb this structure. So now what was actually going on with structure? Placing the building on its stilts, actually stilts are these super columns, huge super columns located at the center, not the corners of each face of the tower. So this was a 9-story stilts suspended the building over the church, but rather than putting the stilts in the corners, they had to be located at the midpoint of each side to avoid the church. Having stilts in the middle of each side made the building less stable. So the structural engineer, he was Lee Misher, designed a chevron bracing structure, rows of 8-story V's that served as the building skeleton. So I will show you the next picture, which will actually tell you the thing. So this was the tower, and these were the stilts. These stilts should have been at the corner of the building, but this, if they had put at the corner of the building, it would have been on the church. So they made it to come at the center. So this one. The 4 corners of the building are actually cantilevered out. You can see here. The 4 corners are actually cantilevered out 115 feet above the street level. Let's look at this picture of the CityCorp tower, which you can see. As we look at the picture, we see first of all that distinctive slash shaped top of tower, and as we look down below, we see those super columns. These are actually the super columns. Another critically important aspect of the structural system is the bracing system. Recognizing that somehow the tremendous weight of this tower had to be transferred to these 4 super columns located in the middle of each face of the building. So these super columns have to take the total weight of the structure which was coming on them. Lee Misher designed a unique chevron bracing. So these V-type bracing, whatever you see here in the picture, they're actually called the chevron bracing system. And here you can see those chevron bracing members forming a series of V shapes up the face of the building. These are the series of chevron braces which are up the building. The chevron bracing then is designed to channel the tremendous weight of the building and all of its occupancy loads down to the center, where it is then transferred down to the super column. Means whatever load which is coming on the structure, all of that load will actually be taken care by these chevron bracings, and it will be channelized, and the all load will actually go to these super columns which are placed at the middle. And these super columns are actually placed at each and every face of the building. It was actually an indigenous design, cutting edge design, and everything seemed just fine until, as Lee Misher, the structural engineer, tells it, he got a phone call. According to Lee Misher, in 1978, an undergraduate architecture student contacted him with a bold claim about the Lee Misher's building, that CityCorp Center would blow over in the wind. Okay, so now what was actually that? After that conversation, the student, who has since been lost in the history, no one knows who was that, was studying the CityCorp Center and had found that the building was particularly vulnerable to quartering winds actually that strike the building at its corner. Means the wind which is coming to the face of the building perpendicular, and quartering winds are the winds that actually come to the corner of the building, that is at 45-degree angle to the face of the building. Normally buildings are strongest at their corners, and it's perpendicular winds that actually strike the building at its faces, that actually cause the greatest strain. Buildings are actually strongest at the corners. That was the assumption. But this was not a normal building, right? Because the stilts were not at the corners of the building. Instead, they were actually in the mid side of the building. Now, after that conversation, he decided that is the structural engineer, after talking to that student, he decided that he would actually do some analysis to determine exactly how much more resistant to these quartering winds the structure can withstand. The structural engineer went back to his home and he redone all these calculations. The result of this analysis were both surprising and frightening for the engineer. They indicated that the structure actually was much more sensitive to quartering winds, that is the winds actually which come at the angle, 45-degree angle, that he had never expected. And as a result, the building's chevron bracing would actually experience 40% higher stresses than he had calculated in his original design. Now there was a significant problem, and he dove into that problem and tried to figure out what he could do and to the extent of the problem. Upon further investigation, he discovered that the building had actually been constructed with bolted connections. Remember, the building what he designed was constructed using the bolted connections rather than with the welded connections that he had specified. The bolted connections weren't as strong as the planned welded connections, because whenever it is a very obvious thing, whenever you make a bolted connection, you actually have to take away some of the steel at the connection location, because you are actually trying to drill the holes through the steel members. So that's why we assume that the bolted connections are not as strong as the welded connections. So now the situation was even worse than he had previously thought. He then consulted with a wind engineering expert who conducted a series of wind tunnel tests on the building. Remember, this all happened after the building construction, and the building was actually occupied by all the occupants, and the bank has already started running in that building. Wind tunnel test on a model of the Citicorp Tower, those results showed that because of the building's position with respect to the other midtown towers, the wind force was actually even greater than anticipated. The cumulative result of all these unanticipated conditions was that the critical chevron bracing, which was there in the structure in that Citicorp Tower, were actually being stressed to about 160% higher than the original design had predicted. So whatever chevron bracing they had built, because of those quartering winds and because of the wind tunnel tests, they were able to come to a conclusion that all those chevron bracings were stressed up to a level of 160% higher than the original design. According to the revised calculation, this building could be expected to blow, means collapse, over in the modest windstorm 1, which was occurring and which was coming to that location every 16 years. So that Lee Measure had these are all I told you that story. So in other words, for every year Citicorp Center was standing, there was a chance that it will stand in only 116, that it would collapse. So there was only a chance that it would collapse is 1 in 16. So it can collapse at any time. That was the conclusion of that structural engineer after consultation with that student and after doing all those wind tunnel tests. So what they did do next? Lee Measure and his team worked with the Citicorp to coordinate an emergency repairs. With the help of New York Police Department, they worked out an evacuation plan spanning a 10-block radius. Means he wanted to make sure that if that collapse happens, there should be an evacuation plan. They had almost around 2,500 Red Cross volunteers on standby, and 3 different weather services employed 24/7 to keep an eye on the potential windstorms which were about to come. They waited throughout the night and quit at daybreaks, just as the building occupants returned to work. Please note, but all this happened in secret. None of the occupants of the building came to know that there was a strengthening or retrofitting work which was going on. Fortunately, Hurricane Ella, which was about to make a landfall in that time, never made a landfall, and so the public were never told about that. Finally, one day, after all the retrofitting work, the secret was disclosed to the public. Later, that structural engineer was lauded as a hero for integrity and his aggressive efforts to rectify his own error. Today, this story is often used as a case study in engineering ethics classes, not just of engineering ethics issues, but also of the incredible challenges that engineers face in balancing innovation with the public safety, particularly in ambitious tall structures like Citicorp Tower. Now, we engineers face a very challenging situation where we have to balance both the innovation and the public safety. We can't bias any one of the parameters. Till today, the structure stands tall and strong. So what are the lessons learned? A crucial check was actually missed out while designing the building. Wind against the skyscraper's corners usually just sort of slides past the building. So Citicorp Towers designers didn't even bothered of checking for them, and that probably would have been the fine if the stilts or the super columns were on the corners. But because of that weird thing with the church, the building's stilts are not at the corner. Instead, they are in the middle of its sides. So the one lesson learned is always leave no stone unturned. Is the lesson. Means you should not bias anything. You should not leave anything. You should check each and everything. So the next one. This is the Millennium Bridge. Not exactly a failure. About the structure. The Millennium Bridge, officially known as the London Millennium Footbridge, is a steel suspension bridge for pedestrians crossing the River Thames in London, linking the Bankside with the city of London. So this picture actually will give you the Millennium Bridge of the London. So what was the design type? It was a suspension bridge. Total length of the bridge was almost around 325 meters. Width was just 4 meters because it was a pedestrian bridge. Longest span was almost around 144 meters. In June 10th, 2000, as a way for pedestrians to cross the River Thames, it was touted as an engineering accomplishment at the time. A sleek new bridge to mark London's entry into the 21st century. Then it promptly closed for repairs on June 12th, 2000. It was opened for a grand total of 3 days. Yes, people, you heard me right. It was open for only 3 days. So what actually happened? The problem wasn't weight or the wind or waves. The bridge was plenty strong enough to deal with everything. It was supposed to hold. Instead, it was the people themselves who were unintentionally making the bridge sway back and forth like a pendulum. You can see in this GIF file, when people are trying to move on the bridge is trying to move back and forth as if it is like a pendulum. Some sort of random coincidence would get a wobble. We call this as back and forth movement as a wobble also. Started like a bunch of people randomly stepping on the bridge on the same side at the same time, and with up to 2000 people crossing at once. That sort of coincidence won't happen at sometimes. So many people walking in synchronization made the wobble get even bigger, and soon it got so extreme that people couldn't walk across the bridge without grabbing the side railings. You can see people are literally afraid to move or cross over the bridge without grabbing the side rails. Bridge probably wasn't in danger of failing because the people would stop walking once the wobbles got too big and wait for them to die down before continue. Okay, people would stop when the wobble gets too much and the wobble comes halt, and people can once again start moving on that. But the wobble would have still weakened the bridge over the time, and the bridge engineer knew exactly what happened in a Tacoma Narrows bridge, which we just seen. Hence, they weren't taking any chances. So they decided to close the bridge pretty much immediately after 3 days of opening, before the wobbles started causing other problems. They spent almost next 2 years adding dampers all along the bridge, which absorb most of the force from pedestrians' steps to keep the bridge from swaying. The bridge was reopened in 2002 with all the dampers firmly in place. So we'll see the next one. That is the last one. This is a very funny kind of failure. This is called a walkie-talkie tower. This is the 20 French First Street. It is actually also called as a French Church Street. Is a commercial skyscraper in London that takes its name from its address on French Church Street in the historic city of London financial district. It has been nicknamed as a walkie-talkie. I will show you why it has been nicknamed. Because of its distinctive shape. It is a 38-story building, almost about 160 meters tall. Designed by architect Raphael, costing almost over 200 million euros. The entrance floor and the 34 floors of the office space are topped by a large viewing deck. Bar and restaurants are included on the 35th, 36th, and 37th floors. You can see the photograph of the walkie-talkie tower. You can conclude why the name was walkie-talkie was given to this kind of tower, because it takes the shape of a walkie-talkie. There was actually some criticism about the structure. What was that criticism? During the building's construction, it was discovered that for a period of about 2 hours each day, if the sun shines directly on the building, it acts as a concave mirror and focuses light on the streets to the south. Spot temperatures readings at street level, including up to 91 degree and 117 degrees Celsius, were observed during the summer 2013. Please note, the temperatures recorded was 91 degrees Celsius to 117 degrees Celsius. You can imagine, if you want to compare a hot cup of tea, the temperature of a hot cup of tea is almost just 50 degrees Celsius. The reflection of the beam of light was up to 6 times brighter than the direct sunlight shining onto the streets. This bright sunlight even melted the car parked on the street. Temperatures in direct line with the reflection became so intense that a reporter, Jim Watterson, one of the report managed to fry an egg in a pan set out on the ground. You can imagine, without the heat, with the just sunlight, he was able to fry an egg on a pan which was set out on the ground. The media responded by dubbing the building as a walkie scrotchy or fry scraper. You can imagine. You can see this diagram will actually tell you what was actually happening. These were the sun rays, the concave shape. This was the concave shape of the building which was given by an architect. The skyscraper means that a large amount of sunlight is reflected to a small area. When the sun rays hits this concave shape, that was actually diverted on this south street onto a small area because of the concave effect. This effect currently lasts about 2 hours per day and is suggested to be present for approximately 2 to 3 weeks due to the changing position of the sun in the sky. You can see this was amount of glare which was coming from the building. This was actually during the construction of the building only. So what they do to solve the problem? In 2014, a permanent shutter, or we can call it as a awning, was actually installed on this. You can see these are all the shutters which were installed on the concave side of the tower, and the reflection got less, and they solved this problem. That shutters were provided on the high floors. So now these are all the structures what I have taken for my PPT. There are many other structures which you can go through, and you can learn some lesson from all those structures. Almost I'm at the end of my session, and my next slides are pretty much very interesting, and it makes everyone to scratch their heads and think what you should actually do. Finally, as an engineer, or I can say as a civil engineer, there are actually 3 choices with you. Either you have to go with cheap, fast, and quality. You have to pick any 2 of them. Which 2 you will pick? You can think for a second and you can see what will happen. Let me tell you the consequences. Consequences are, if you go for cheap and fast, you should compromise on quality. If you go with fast and quality, it is not so cheap. If you go with cheap and quality, it is not so fast. So which 2 you will pick? As per me, as per my suggestion, always avoid the first one, which you will compromise on the quality. Choose between the second or third. If you want to go with the third choice, that is fast and quality, it will not be so cheap. Means if you are having abundant amount of money, you can go with the second one. If you have a lot of time, you can go with the third one, but it will not be so fast. So, similarly, in structural engineering also, we have 3 terms: light, strong, and cheap. Which 2 you will pick? Once again, let me tell you the consequences. Light and cheap, it will not be so strong. If you want to go with strong and cheap, it will not be so fast. If you want to go with light and strong, it will not be so cheap. Once again, my suggestion goes, always avoid the first one, which will not be strong. Go with the second or third one based on your situation. So this comes to end of my session. These are some of the materials which I referred to make this PPT. I'm not an expert on all these kind of topics, but I thought, let me just brief the audience about what are the different types of structures that have failed and what we can see. I particularly want to tell here that this last reference, that is William Le Mesurier, the 59-story crisis, a lesson in professional behavior. If you want to see this, you have to go to the YouTube, and if you just type this much, you will see 1 hour session by actually the structural engineer Le Mesurier, who was the structural engineer of that Citycorp tower. He has literally, in his own words, explained what he faced in all those situations. It is a very interesting one. Whoever is interested, you can go through that. So finally, thank you. Learn from mistakes of others, because you can't live long enough to make them all by yourself. Thank you, everyone. I will share all this PPT through who will submit the feedback form to all your email IDs. I will try to share all the PPTs. And in the chat box, we are actually giving you the feedback link, and everyone can go there and submit the feedback. So if you want to have any discussions, the platform is open. You can have the discussions.
Yes, regarding feedback, I already shared a feedback link in chat box. Please, I request all participants to give your feedback.
And I also request anybody want to say regarding this PPT, nothing like question and answer. If you want to discuss anything, the platform is open.
Hello, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Go ahead, sir.
It was a mind-blowing session, sir. We really enjoyed it. Enjoyed a lot. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Actually, apart from general sessions, because it's the history which we have to focus on more, right?
Yes,
We
sir.
learned a
Yes, sir.
lot of new things, and actually, you said that external factors are unknown by civil engineers, because we generally go there, we do soil tests, we anticipate failures, earthquake motions, forces, base shears, etc. But depending upon when you are going for aesthetically pleasing buildings or some historic monuments, some sort of bridges like that, you have to consider, as you said, that glare alone hit and made the cars to melt down. Okay, so
Yes,
those
sir.
are really we can't predict it. So we have 360-degree vision to take out of all these things. And apart
Yes.
from design, we learned such a lot of things, and it will be very helpful if you can share the PPT so that we
Yeah.
can answer
Yes, sir.
more.
Surely, sir. I will share the PPT. Once you give the feedback, your email ID will be recorded with us, and we'll share the PPT. Thank you for your words, sir. I had to want to say a few words. Like, I'm also a teaching faculty here, and I'm teaching since from last 6 years. And as per me, we have never come across any subject where it teaches the lessons learned from the previous failures. I think it is the role of all our teaching faculty, practicing engineers, research scholars, and students, not only just to design a building, even if we try to learn the lessons which have happened, learn the lessons from the earlier failures, it would be very nice, and it will be very much helpful to each and everyone. So I almost urge everyone to please go back and learn all these kind of failures.
Good evening, Deepak sir. I have a small doubt. When you are telling about that city crop building and
Yes, sir.
45-degree drop, I thought that the solution might lie in that 45-degree drop and based on wind analysis. Is there anything, sir, like that?
No, sir. No, nothing was related to that 45-degree drop. And actually, the stilts which were provided at the middle of the face, that were actually causing the uh, problem. So that 45-degree angle drop was just an aesthetical appearance. It was nothing to do with the wind and anything, as per my knowledge goes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So anybody want to share anything? Then go ahead. Or anybody knows any other type of structures which are not included in my PPT? You can go ahead. Can share the views. Even this presentation will be actually put on our official YouTube channel, SGBIT_official. If you go to YouTube and type SGBIT_official, the whole recording will be posted on the YouTube channel. And if you want to refer, you can go there also and refer the thing later on.
Sir, where is that feedback form?
So it is actually posted in the chat box, sir. In the chat box, yes, sir. Chat box, you can see we have posted the feedback form link.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yes. I presume that there are no any discussions or questions on this. I think we can end the session.
Yes. I think some participant is asking.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can speak out, sir.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Almost ಮುಗಿದಿದೆ, sir.
Hello.
A discussion. We are in discussion, sir.
Discussion.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Discussion.
Yes, sir. Going on discussion, sir.
Connection problem.
Okay. Okay. Yes, sir.
Okay. Question.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Question.
Any discussion or any questions? The platform is open. You can have a discussion.
Santosh.
Yes, sir. ಇಲ್ಲ sir. ಇಲ್ಲ sir.
Actually, sir, I think we can end the session, sir.
Okay, sir. HOD, sir.
Deepak sir.
Hello, sir. Voice is not audible. No, sir, not yet, sir.
Deepak.
No, sir. No, sir.
Hello, Deepak.
No, sir. He has not joined.
Hello.
Hello, sir.
Santosh.
Sir,
Yes,
sir has not joined, sir.
Why?
Not joined, sir.
Hello. No.
No, sir. Not yet joined, sir.
Yes, I'll no, the interaction is over now.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Over, sir. You can wind up,
It's
sir.
over, sir.
The interaction is over now. All this thing.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Over, sir. Over. Sir, hello, sir.
Any
You can,
questions
sir,
from
interaction
the
is over, sir.
participants,
You can give the conclude remarks, sir.
Yeah.
Interaction is over, sir.
Any questions from the participants, please? Okay. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Professor Deepak Patil has covered a lot actually. He has covered 6 very important structures. One is the Hayat bridge failure, Tacoma narrow bridge failure. Third one is the Canto bridge failure. Fourth one is City Clock Tower, New York. Then fifth one is the Millennium Tower, New York. Then fifth one is the Millennium Bridge, London. Then last one is the Walkie Talkie Tower, London. Professor Deepak Patil has actually covered a lot of the structural aspects of all these bridges. So where they actually went wrong, the failures in all these structures. Okay, so your presentation is very nice, Deepak sir, and your
Thank you, sir.
slides are also very beautiful. So it went very smooth, the presentation for 1 hour. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Hello.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
We thank all the participants, all the faculty members across the country. So there are many participants. Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you. there were many participants joined from South India, even from the North India, Indore and all. So I thank all the faculty members of the various institutes and all the student friends who have joined this important webinar, and he has presented in a very beautiful way. So I thank all the participants for joining this webinar. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So next week we are going to organize one more the webinar, that is fourth webinar, that is the IoT application in the construction industry, which is going to be delivered by our principal, Dr. Sidramappa Itti. So next Saturday, so we'll again post this the poster and also the details in the news media. So thank you one and all. Thank you, Deepak sir.
Thank you, sir. I once again thank all the participants. We'll have one more webinar in the next week.
Santosh.
In the registration link, everything will be circulated to you
Okay.
shortly. So hope everyone has got the feedback form link. Please submit that. In next 20 to 30 minutes, we'll close that feedback link. So we please do that. And once we record your email IDs through the feedback link, we'll send you this PPT also. And e-certificates will be provided once you submit the feedback form. Next 1 or 2 days, you will get the e-certificates. Thank you one and all. Santosh sir.
Yes, sir.
So we have recorded this now.
Yes, sir. Recorded, sir. Also,
sir.
charts ಎಲ್ಲ copy ಮಾಡಿದೆ sir.
Yes. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Now, thank you. We will end this meetings now. Participants, thank you very much. Santosh sir, you can end this meeting now.
Yes, sir. I will end the meeting.
Yes. Thank you very much.
So we'll end the meeting now. Stop.